Thank you. That completes the wreath laying. Thank you, Mrs. Walters. If any of those wreath layers now would like to occupy a chair there, if they're unable to stand, there's plenty of chairs available. Now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, or the person who's giving the address this morning, and that will be Mr. Frank Bowdler, a member of the 25th Association. Thank you, Frank.
Chairman Ernie, Your Worship the Mayor, distinguished guests and wreath layers, and fellow members of the 25th Battalion, and all others who are gathered here this morning, I'm sure that every one of you feel privileged to be able to be part of this ceremony, to try to pay tribute to all of those who were involved in the Milne Bay battle, and particularly to all of those who gave their lives, that we can be here this morning enjoying the freedom of this in this beautiful setting. One of our sons has just been transferred to work in New York, left yesterday, and when he rang before leaving, I was telling him that about this gathering and that I had the responsibility to try and say something appropriate in commemoration of the occasion, and he said to me that, well, as long as you try not to give the impression that you're glorifying war and that you show your appreciation to those who gave their lives so that we can enjoy the freedom that we do, you'll be doing a good job. And that was without any prompting, and I think that it probably does sum up what we are about today, because we certainly don't glorify war. Even the loss of one life is too many, and we lost many at Milne Bay and everywhere else where there was conflict, and there was hardship and sorrow and loss and loss of time and life. I shared tents at different times with our married men, fellows like Big Leo and Ron Andrews and Chester and Greg Ledbetter, and I know that the loss they felt being away from their wives and their loved ones, how they'd read the letters from home many times, and it didn't really hit me until I had a wife and children and been away from them to realise the loss that they felt. So that's a hidden loss really that people don't realise about war. So I'm sure none of us glorify war. We've been commemorating this occasion every year, and often after our celebration there's been letters in the Chronicle from people, an odd one only, very odd one, perhaps suggesting that we're giving undue prominence to Milne Bay, making out that it's the only event in the war, and perhaps that we of the 25th Battalion giving ourselves too much of a rap. Well, Milne Bay was significant, and only historians will ever tell us how it relates in conjunction with so many other important events that took part that made the world free for us today. But it was an important occasion. The Japanese, from the time that they attacked Pearl Harbor, had been almost, as Bishop Charles said so beautifully in his address in St. James on Sunday morning, said that they appeared almost invincible. They'd knocked out the American fleet in the Pacific. They'd come down and taken Malaya and Singapore, which we thought was nearly invulnerable. They'd occupied Rabaul, and their aim was then to occupy Milne Bay, and from there to take Port Moresby and come on to Australia. And in God's wonderful providence, they didn't take Milne Bay. They didn't land at the right place. The rain and the mud and the slush inhibited their advance because their tanks were not able to be as useful as they might have been. And they were surprised at the wonderful resistance, really, that a small force had been able to generate against them. We know too that they asked for reinforcements, and perhaps if they had received those reinforcements, Milne Bay could have been lost. And who knows, it was a turning point in the war, an important one, not necessarily the most important, but it was, because it gave great consolation. It was the first time that they'd been beaten on land, and because of that, even I read in the paper during the weeks that Sir William Slim from Burma said that it gave them great heart, that if it could be done by the Australians in New Guinea, that it could be done by them in Burma. So it was a turning point. And as for the 25th Battalion, I would hope that we would never be ever giving the suggestion that we were somehow supermen. We were very ordinary, everyday human beings. Again, in God's providence, we happened to be at Milne Bay at that particular time, and we did, I feel, and I think I can say this humbly and sincerely, that our members did what they were asked to do in the circumstances in which they found themselves. Did it with self-sacrifice and courage, and because of that, I feel that we can feel satisfied that we played some small but important part in that event. Now, there's been lots of things written in the last week and said, and beautiful things, and Reverend Dalglish said some very appropriate things there. I had thought of many things, other things to be saying, but you're standing there and you're tired. Perhaps if I can just say two or three things. Firstly, to pay a tribute to our leaders in the battalion. When many of us went into Kabbalah for the first time on 2 days before Christmas in 1941, we were very raw and untrained. I'd never held a rifle, let alone fire one, knew nothing really about war, but due to the magnificent leadership of our Lieutenant Colonel Ted Miles, of revered memory, the officers and the NCOs who so diligently trained us. I can recall the wonderful manoeuvre that we did from Kabbalah through to Crow's Nest and down to Kilcoy and through the Lockyer Valley and back up the toll bar back to Kabbalah, 8-day manoeuvre. I understand that was something really unique that happened in the training of troops at that time. And how hard it was. That first day from Kabbalah to Crow's Nest, marching 50 minutes with a pack on our back and the rifle on our shoulder, I thought that it would kill me. I don't think I ever felt anything but by the end of that manoeuvre, I was walking as if I didn't have a pack on my back and the rifle on my shoulder. And so it is a tribute to those who trained us and what we did. And then scrambling down to the railway to catch the train down at Spring Bluff and onto Yamundi, in through Townsville, behind Townsville, where we were digging trenches with picks and shovels to try and protect the area during the Coral Sea battle. Then to New Guinea on the Bontico. What an experience that was on such a primitive ship, really, smelly and dirty and rough, and so many sick. Many of us I'd never been on a boat before. That was certainly an experience. and then to find ourselves in New Guinea where we didn't know where we were really, but at least still with our winter uniforms, disorganised, all of the rain. It's really a miracle of our leadership that they were able to weld us into a coherent and satisfactory military force. And so I pay tribute to Colonel Miles, to our officers like Jack Duggan and Bluey White, to all of the NCOs for what they did in making us into the men that we are. And just the final thought then, perhaps about our association. We are told sometimes that it's rather unique, and I think probably it is. I'm not saying that with certainty because I haven't had a lot to do with other associations, but it certainly has been a wonderful association. I feel that if I had to be, I didn't want to be in the war, but having had to be in it, I'm grateful that I was in the 25th Battalion. Perhaps we had an affinity of interest. Nearly all of us came from this area, from Toowoomba, the Lockyer Valley, Stanthorpe, Warwick, Dalby, Crow's Nest and the Darling Downs. I think we had some interests in common. Perhaps we were not as sophisticated and as one of those coming from the big cities. Perhaps we had an openness and friendliness and wholesomeness that mightn't have existed in other units, and it manifested itself in so many simple but important ways. I remember when you'd be on bivouac or on doing something that your tent mates would wash your clothes. Little things, but very important things. You could leave your money on your bunk, on your palliasse, and it wouldn't be taken. I don't think we can take those things for granted. And so that after the war, it's little wonder that the association formed such a wonderful bond, that what we shared together in sacrifice we gave out a day. Now I feel that perhaps if I finish on that, that's really what we're about today. They gave everything for our freedom, for the freedom we enjoy today, and for that of our children. For that we thank them. We pray to God that they enjoy eternal rest for the sacrifice that they made, and we pray that we will be worthy of them and that our country will be worthy of them. So let us remember today with gratitude all of those who gave their lives, and particularly, seeing as it's the 25th Battalion, all those who died at Milne Bay, including such wonderful men as Squadron Leader Turnbull. I remember the sorrow that we all felt when it was told to us that he had been killed, and how they found him sitting in the cockpit dead in his plane, came too low trying to strafe the Japanese. The wonderful 18th Brigade, people like Corporal John Fench, who won the DC, all of those, let us remember today every one of those at Milne Bay, all of the associated groups, the Americans too, who when we had no organised meal places, often when we went past them, who fed us. Let us remember today with gratitude all of those and pray that we will always be worthy of them.
Thank you, Frank. We'll now carry on, and the first item will be the last post. This will be followed by 1 minute silence and the ode, followed by the reveille, which the flag will be raised to the masthead. Last post.